But comes audio son, you burn the swine when no want you shine. The tree of life, them no want you climb, cause them heart no kind. Comes I say them heart no kind. Buxton Massive, Kidaki, read that.
Never joke, never joke, never joke. Oh, money never, money never, money, money never, money, money. Now know what you can even money, money never, money never, money, money never, money, money. You can keep, you can even money. When you been a corrupt in a bill, tell me money. Now because your money done, you come with conniving money. When you had your pocket full in a bill, tell me money. Now because your money done, you hustle for tell me money. Yes, money never, money never, money, money never, money, money. Now know what you conniving money. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. Neighbor, neighbor, joker. That's all the money that me walk for. A 2 pound note and a guilder piece. A 2 pound note and a guilder piece. A 2 pound note and a guilder piece. That's all the money that me walk for. I said money, neighbor, money, neighbor, money, money, neighbor, money, money. Now I don't want you can I be money. Oh, Joseph.
Well, I invoke the WPA's position that we are engaging in civil disobedience and non-cooperation with the government, and on that grounds I refuse to participate in the interview. The question in struggle, is not personal. Whatever sacrifice as a political activist or a political leader you have to make for your people, you have to make it.
Guyana and Guyanese, at home and abroad. Tune in to Guyanese Morning Time, hosted by Kadaki Amsterdam, where the sun always shines. Guyanese Morning Time, the people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. We rise up early morning watching Kams TV, where wisdom and knowledge, yes, it is the key. Exposing corruptions over land and sea, where the wicked politicians they try to trick me. Guyana is a land for everybody. With 6 races should live in harmony. Is one set of people getting aisle money. Is one set of people doing the thievery. Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. This is a program that you all can see. Sharing your views and your integrity. Like it, comment and share it all around. Pass it to your neighbor, safe and sound. A sad situation going on in this town. The voice of the people is getting trampled down. Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, which has ordained me to sing. I sing Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people calling Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, fooling the people. You promoting evil. Stop lying to the people. You are a part of the cycle. Stop fooling people. You're promoting evil. Stop lying to the people. You You are a part of the cycle. I say Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. They got Rickford, Bork and Mark Benchcop. David Hines and Kadaki Amsterdam. Sherrod Duncan, Nigel London. Normal Brown and Gavin Matthews. Big up Paslow, Port People Governor. Simona Brooms, Robin Simpson. Hampton Green and Winston Jordan. And yes, we can go right on and on. Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again.
The relatives and friends of young Wyndham Bacchus, they deserve justice. The family, the relatives and friends of our in Boston, they deserve justice. The family, the relatives and friends of Peter Headley, they deserve justice.
And so when we say that Guyana is an apartheid state, we have the evidence to show.
How are you doing, neighbor? Welcome to another program of Guyanese Morning Time. It is now 7 hours 26 on the 4th day of July in the year 2023. I am your host, the Buxtonian, Kidaki Amsterdam. CARICOM is 50 years old today. Right? CARICOM is 50 years old today. Institution is a few days older than I am, man. Yes. Yesterday was CARICOM Day. The question was asked of me yesterday or last evening. Is CARICOM Day observed on the 4th of July or... In fact, to be exact, I think the question is CARICOM Day today, as in yesterday, or is it on the 4th of July? And so, from my recollection, I grew up knowing CARICOM Day to be the 4th of July. It is the 4th of July, 1973. But the observations, the observances, commemoration, if I can call it that, is done on the first Monday in the month of July. That's what I know. Right? Where that changed over time, I can't tell you. Right? But I know in the most recent of times, CARICOM Day is observed on the first Monday of July. But today is actually the date of the establishment of CARICOM. Good? Lots of activities are going to be taking place. I see Hakeem Jeffries and Blinken and so on, and a lot of other ranking and leading members of the U.S. government are going to be attending some ceremony or meeting of the CARICOM community as part of the observances. I would expect that there will be closed doors meetings and so on with these ranking members, these big shots in the U.S. government. And I hope that on the agenda of those meetings we're going to find the Guyanese situation. I do hope that. But as we say, time will tell. Let us watch and wait and wait and watch. But while we're watching and waiting and waiting and watching, let us not do so idly. We have work to do as a people. Certainly have work to do as a people. As you might rather suspect, the discussion for this week, quite frankly, because I see this discussion as an ongoing one, is the quest for Hindu domination and Indian domination in this dear land of ours, and how we are going to handle it as a people, as an African people, as non-Hindus, which means as Muslims, as Christians, whatever your religion that is not Hindu. How will we deal with this quest? Good? How do we deal with this quest? Are we just going to come here and pontificate and we're going to, in broad terms, identify the lack of leadership, the failure of leadership, the trickery of leadership? Because I'm convinced we have a lot of tricksters within the leadership. How are we going to deal with that? But, as is usual, I need to find out how you are. What's your mental state of health? What's your physical state of health? How are you coping? How did you pass here yesterday and last night? How many of you went out to the protest at Square of the Revolution yesterday? I understand there was a vibrant one out there. I understand the policeman made a comment on the protest. Is that a sign? Is that a sign that the message is getting to our brothers and sisters within the ranks? Is that policeman going to get an easy time after yesterday? Is that policeman who, one who is, as we say, is willing to take a bullet for us, is willing to bite the bullet for us, is willing to bell the cat? Or he was just caught up in his feelings? Right, but we shall look and see where that leads. But did you make money yesterday? Were you able to take care of the things that you need to take care of as individuals to ensure that you and your family and so on, and your community and so on, are in a good place and a better place? Did you make money? Did you have a side hustle, or you were strictly on your 8 to 4? 8 to 5, 8 to 4. I see somebody saying your volume is low. Cecile Ogle. Cecile, I'm sorry, I don't have much more volume on my devices here. Let me see. Yeah, I don't have much more volume on my devices. And I'm afraid to open my mouth. Y'all don't know the sacrifices I make, or we make, to do these things that we do. As I speak to you, I got a serious problem. But I will get through the next 2 hours or so, and then I'm going to attend to it. Right? It is what 50 brings you. 50 brings you that. Yeah, 50 brings you that. I don't, it's not everything I need to tell y'all, but sometimes you read through the line. I can't shout too much and so on. But yes, did you stick to your 8 to 4? Were you able to do better than your 8 to 4? Did you sleep well? Or you had disturbances in your neighborhood for whatever reason? Whatever happened, I am hoping, I do trust that you okay, I think I see I might be able to fix it. Good. Is this better? I hope it is. Indicate if you're getting me louder. I don't know. But whatever happened yesterday and in the course of last evening and so on, I do hope that you woke this morning feeling, first and foremost, grateful that you can take another breath of life. And secondly, recommitted to the struggles that are ahead of you. Because the struggles will be long. Right? The struggles will be long. And the battles will be hard too. But we must have that determination to weather our storm. We must have that determination to fight. Because like I said in the title of the program, fight or die. Right? Fight or die. If you can't fight for your survival, then it's likely that you're going to die. And some people, when they heard about death, they believe that it is only physical death. Right? Is it only physical death that you can die? I believe you can die spiritual death. The Christians tell you about dying spiritually. You can suffer some financial debts. And this is not DEBT. Right? But the reality is, if you don't fight, you're going to find yourself marginalized. You're going to find yourself further discriminated, further disadvantaged.
And all of those are forms of death in my mind. When a father cannot earn his daily bread to provide for his family, real fathers know how that eats them inside, as we like to say, how it kills them. Right? When a mother has to look at her children going hungry or being abused because of the inability to provide for them adequately, those are forms of death that we don't want to even think about. Right? So we have to fight. We have to fight. This morning I want to analyze a couple of issues which would have taken place over a short period of time or over a lengthy period of time, and adjust how we dealt with them. And let us ask ourselves if the manner of dealing with those issues will really help us to survive this time, when the quest is Hindu and Indian domination in this country. But let me remind you that there is a vacancy for an experienced butcher. Yes, there is a vacancy for an experienced butcher to operate in the East Rhine Belt market. The hours of work would be from 7 to 4, 7 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. Your normal schedule is, as I like to say, Sunday to Sunday, but you will get a day off weekly, right? So it's not 7 days work, it's more 6 days work, right? So you get 1 day off in the week. Again, there's a need for an experienced butcher in the East Rhine Belt market to work from 7 in the morning to 4 in the afternoons. And you get 1 day off per week. The number to contact is 609-2049. 609-2049. Right? 609-2049. Yeah, somebody's asking if the police could be an infiltrator. All of those things are possible. Because we know that when we go there to protest, we have all kinds of elements in our presence. A lot of plainclothes police. Some tell you they're members of the media. Some tell you they're social media influencers. Some tell you they're bloggers. They tell you all kinds of things. Right? But like they say, you can look at a barrel as full or half empty or half full. Otherwise, simply I addressed this issue of volume already. I can't do much more about the volume. Okay. Maybe that's better for you. I hope. I'm in pain this morning. Let me say that. So I can't really do much more than I'm doing. I see Irfan Prasad is taking the time to tell us that Irfan Ali is a Muslim, not a Hindu. And I'm happy that he points that out for the 100th time. We know Irfan Ali is a Muslim. I don't even know if he's a practicing Muslim, but he's a Muslim. And when I started addressing this issue of Hindu domination as proposed by Ravi Dev in that tape, I'm sure I pointed out that if you look at the structure of the government, you will see that Ali, who is a Muslim, is the named president. But you will see that Jagdeo, who is a Hindu, or supposedly a Hindu, runs the government. Do you want us to go and examine the structure of the government or the structure of the wielders of powers in the PPP administration? There's no question that despite Ali is a Muslim and he is the president, the government is dominated by Hindus. The Attorney General is Anil Nandlal. Education Minister Priya Manik Chand. Minister of Social Services Vindya Prasad. Nigel Dharamlal. Regional Development and Local Government, and so on and so forth. Right? Don't look at who is named president. Look at who controls the government. Look at who wields the power. And you will come to realize that the PPP government is dominated by Hindus. The power wielders are Hindus. And many will want to say I'm trying to create religious division and so on. I have no interest in creating religious division. I would love to see a united Guyana. But I can only address the issues as I see them. I can only analyze and comment on what is right before our eyes. I don't have to, as I say, you don't see it in the day and go and look for it in the night with a jog lamp. Ravi Dev in 2014 representing the PPP at a Hindu Congress in Suriname had a lot to say about Hindu domination in Guyana and quoted or informed the meeting that he was speaking on behalf of and for the government of Guyana, and that his speaking points, his talking points, came from no other than Dr. Singh. Who is Dr. Singh? In 2014, Dr. Singh was a man who controlled the country's finances. He is the finance minister. In 2023, they say he is minister within the Ministry of the Presidency or something like minister within the office of the president with responsibility for finance. Same thing. As we say, same shite on a different day. So what do you think has changed from 2014 to now? What do you think has changed from 2014 to now? The only thing I think has changed from 2014 to now is that plan to dominate Guyana, to dominate non-Hindus, is being executed. And it might be executed at a rate faster than you even recognize. I saw in yesterday's program somebody said, oh, that is why we are seeing so many Bangladeshis, I think, in Latem, or whichever the region they identified. I can't remember clearly, but they say that there is some part of Guyana where there is an extraordinarily high number of Bangladeshis. Why do you think that the Hindu-dominated government issued a ban on Haitians who are not Hindus coming to Guyana? Why do you think it has become so difficult for people looking like me, people who look like African Guyanese, black people, to come to this country? Why do you think they make it so difficult? Apart from banning Asians and so on, making it difficult for Africans or people of African heritage to come to Guyana, they make it hell for African Guyanese, Guyanese of African heritage, to get by in this society. Do I have to remind you that as soon as the PPP went into office, by whatever means, the contract for mortuary services that was held by the Lycan family, maybe since Noah was a boy, was taken away from them and given to an Indo-Guyanese operating out of the Lear Frontier Cemetery there. They call it Memorial Guyanese or something like that. Check the name and the religion of that person to who that contract was given. Do I have to remind you that an African Guyanese brother who was able to import fuel, who had a valid fuel license, his license was suspended under some crazy guys? I think he went to the court. The court said he's entitled to his license, etc. Do you know if he has that license up to now? Do I have to remind you that a popular journalist who was a licensed gold exporter, gold buyer, in partnership with somebody, had that license taken away from him, and up to now he doesn't have it returned? Do I have to remind you of the hell that they put Sivan's Waste Management and Car Care Enterprise, I think, the owners through for lands that they were allocated for the growth and development of their business? And these are lands I'm telling you about that were acquired legally through a legal process. Huh? Do I have to point these things out to you for you to understand and recognize how the Hindu domination of this economy is taking place? Do your research, you will find out, for example, that development that they talk about on the Linden-Suzaik Highway, Silica City. Do your research and find out what percentage of Hindus own the lands there. Do a survey of the businesses on Regent Street and see how many Indian nationals operate on Regent Street. And you can investigate their religious backgrounds. And you can do that for every sector of this economy if you want. You can do that for every sector of this economy. But I'm sure what you will come up with at every time, every juncture, is evidence to support the position that this society is on a trajectory to be dominated by the Hindus and Indians, because there must be what I want to call a slight variation here and there. Because an Indian is an Indian. An Indian is an Indian. And then you have the subclasses, if I call it that, Hindus and Muslim and so on. So there's no carte blanche ban, or I would say no policy to prevent Indians coming to Guyana to operate in the various sectors and to acquire wealth in the various sectors and so on. But there's certainly a preference for the Hindu presence. Let's not run from that. Somebody asked me the other day, how it is when you look around the society, you see so many quote-unquote young Indian men and women acquiring wealth in the society as against young African Guyanese men and women and men and women of other ethnicities in this country. The disparity, you see the disparity. It's my theory, and I think it is supported by some amount of data that I was able to collect through the process of observation. It is my theory that the Bank of Baroda is the Bank of Baroda owned by the Indian government. Can somebody verify that for me? Who are the real owners of the Bank of Baroda? What are the internal arrangements of facilitating commerce, financing of import-export through the bank? What are the arrangements there? What are the arrangements or the understanding, the philosophy, if you will, among Indo-Guyanese businessmen or business people, because there are women in the midst, when it comes to startup businesses by young Indo-Guyanese? Do you know a lot of the mobile businesses, whether they're selling provision or whether they're selling clothes or whatever they're selling hardware, these businesses in the cantors and so on, the mobile businesses, are funded by major business owners in the city? Do you know that? Do the research, for example, on, and this is no small business, e-network, and see if you can track and trace where the financing for the expansion of e-network came from. I think that guy that was managing director of DDL, is he still alive? I can't remember. Is he still alive? I think he died, but I'm just asking, is he still alive? What role did he play in the expansion, the provision of capital? The owner of the Demerara Bank, or one of the major shareholders, directors of the Demerara Bank, in the acquisition of capital for the expansion of e-networks. Those are just some of the things I want to throw there for you to analyze them. And see how they tie into this theory, this proposition from Ravidev of Hindu domination, and the willingness of the PPP government to facilitate Hindu domination in this country. Right? But the question is, on my intention is not to continue to dwell on what is now known. In that we already know that the aim of the PPP is to dominate the Guyanese society. By religion as in Hindu domination, and by ethnicity as in Indian domination. We know that. The question is, how do we fight back? What do we do to prevent them achieving these goals? Let me say we're late already. We're more than 8 years late because our leaders are pointing out, they keep pointing out, that video is 8 years old or 9 years old. And since they have done nothing on it, they have not acted contrary to it for that period of time, let me say that we are more than 8 or 9 years late. Because when that discussion was had in Suriname, that was not the birth of the idea of Hindu domination. That idea was already incubated long before that. It was already hatched before that. And so for all you know, we might be 20 years late. But we are aware. We know now. More of us are aware now. The question is, how do we count it? What do we do? One of the first things we like to say is boycott. Boycott their businesses. If you boycott their businesses, they will not experience the kind of growth that will first and foremost encourage them to stay in business, or perhaps even stay in the country. We like to say that. But have we yet come up with an alternative? When we boycott the Indian merchants, the Hindu merchants on Regent Street and around the country, who are we turning to? Who are we turning to? Y'all talk to me. Who are we turning to? Cloth, for example. One of the biggest cloth dealers, or the bigger cloth dealers in this country. In fact, I can't even name an African Guyanese who is into the sale of cloth. I said it last year, I think, that it is a sickening and embarrassing thing to know that if you really want African prints, you gotta go on a store on Regent Street. A Hindu national will sell, a Hindu Indian national perhaps will sell you African prints. There's no storefront on Regent Street that I can name off the top of my head that you can walk into and buy African prints. At least not on a large scale. So who are the cloth traders in this society? People that wear clothes. Black people love their curtains and so on. The majority of the public service is black. African Guyanese, they gotta get uniforms. Who are the importers of cloth on a large scale? So if we say boycott the cloth sellers, for example, who we turn into for cloth? I have the name, for example, of the suppliers of military uniforms in this country. They're black, you know. Even the importer of the cloth, because military uniform is specialized. The material, police and the joint services, let me say, specialized materials. That is a multi-billion-dollar industry, a multi-billion-dollar supply line to the government of Guyana. Check and see who are the people who control that. When we boycott, who are we turning to? And since we're recognizing now that when we boycott, we don't have anybody to turn to. The answer to that, for me, is for us as a people to provide a solution to that first problem. When we boycott, who are we turning to? And I'm talking about cloth, for example, right now. Remember the Rihanna House of Fashion? Or Mackie's House of Fashion, what do you call it? Rihanna House of Fashion. I think that was one of the closest we ever came to having one of our own in the fabric business on a large scale. What became of that? With the death of Mackie or whatever his name was, that died, right? Are we saying we do not have a large enough group of African Guyanese who can pool their resources, pool their capital together and establish a house of fashion? I'm calling it loosely that. And there are enough Guyanese of African descent with access to capital in the diaspora or right here at home who can pool their resources and become major suppliers of cloth in this Guyanese economy? There might be a challenge, right? The Hindu-dominated government might make it difficult for the import license and so on. But nothing ventured, nothing gained. Unless we are prepared to fight, we are going to die. We will not have businesses of that nature. How about that? How about food? Who are the importers of food in this country? We like foreign food, right? Who's that? We love foreign food. Somebody's at my gate. Let me just push out my head and answer them. You know, they're in the program till 9 o'clock morning, sir. How you do? Be a strain, folks. Give me a minute. I could tell you who they're at my gate, but it ain't always necessary to tell you that. Somebody's at my gate. I gotta let them in. So give me a minute. I'll be back with you.
Well, I invoke the WPA's position that we are engaging in civil disobedience and non-cooperation with the government. And on that grounds, I refuse to participate in the interview. The question in struggle, you know, is not personal. Whatever sacrifice as a political activist or a political leader you have to make for your people, you have to make it.
Guyana and Guyanese, at home and abroad. Tune in to Guyanese Morning Time, hosted by Amsterdam, where the sun always shines. Guyanese Morning Time, the people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge on the front line. We go again, Guyanese Morning Time. The people call it Guyanese Morning Time. Rhythm, Guyanese Morning Time. Intelligence and knowledge on the front line. We go again. We rise up early morning watching Kams Tv, where wisdom and knowledge, yes, it is the key. exposing corruptions over land and sea, where the wicked politicians they try to trick me. Guyana is a land for everybody, with 6 races should live in harmony. Is one set of people getting oil money, is one set of people doing the thievery. Beep beep, Guyanese morning time, the people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again, Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning time. Rhythm, rhythm, Guyanese morning time. Intelligence and knowledge run the front line. We go again. This is a program that you all can see. Sharing your views and your integrity. Like it, comment and share it all around. Pass it to your neighbor, safe and sound. A sad situation going on in this town. The voice of the people is getting trampled down. Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, which has ordained me to sing. I sing Guyanese morning time. The people calling Guyanese morning.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's all your business. It's our business. Yes, so I'm asking. Food. If you boycott these merchants, who are the people importing food in this country? What's the alternative? What's the alternative? Let's talk about the alternative here. The African representative organizations are picking an act this morning. I think it's one of the older ones. Is there any data collected by these organizations? Can I turn to any of these organizations and say, well, I want to know what is the most consumed item of food among Africans in this country? And so they will tell me, look, the African community utilizes 1 million pounds of potato per month. And since we know we don't have anybody importing potato, we know that 1 million pounds of potato per month at $100, we are spending $100 million with our oppressors monthly. And so we can bring a couple of our people together and say, listen, let us fight for an import license to even bring in 50 million pounds of potato per month. So we will cut our expenditure to our oppressors by half monthly. Can any of these African organizations say to me, our people are using 6 million gallons of oil per month? In short, I'm asking, these representative African organizations, have any of them taken the time to do a survey among our people and create a database as to what is consumed from an anchor to pin by the African Guyanese community, and therefore use that information as bargaining tool. Because when you are informed about what your value is to the economy, you can leverage it. Do we have that happening? No, I dare say no, because let me say I don't know. But I am willing to say no. I'm willing to put my head on a block and say there's no such data out there collected by our African-oriented organizations. And so we say boycott, boycott, boycott. But while we know that the financial impact could be big if we boycott, we can't put a dollar value to it. And we are not even contemplating, or maybe we are contemplating, but we are not even taking actions to provide an alternative to that which we're talking about boycotting. Good. I will argue and tell you that, look, when the auto sale trade got shaken up in this country and black people started being in a position to buy cars and so on, is when King Solomon started trading in cars. And Brantford, when those two black brothers got involved in the auto trade business, to some extent the playing field became leveled, because black people now were able to go to them and get similar deals or better deals than the Indian importers were providing for their ilk. And so that's testimony enough to say, listen, if our black business people decide that we can really get together, pour our capital to provide an alternative arrangement for our citizens, our people looking like us, we might be in a different position. So the problem is there. We know that we are confronted with Hindu, or the quest for Hindu and Indian domination in this society. But the question I'm asking of us and our leaders, what are the solutions to the problems? I hope I'm pointing, like I say, I might not be the smartest person in the room or the brightest light, but can you refine my ideas? Can you fine-tune my ideas and make them work? Can we refine my ideas and make them work? We don't necessarily have to start at a national level, let me say that. We can start in our communities. Do we know in our communities what do we consume on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And so we will recognize the value of what leaves the community when these mobile businesses come through, blowing from 6 in the morning to 6 in the night. Some of them are coming from as far as Parika to sell ground provision and so on. It says that there is value in what they're doing. Have we taken the time to make that a study? That's what I'm thinking in terms of solution. I know, for example, I mentioned King Solomon. My understanding is that he was hounded out of the car trade business because he was creating a real problem for his competitors. Part of the arrangement in terms of motor vehicle import and import and sale, is that you have what they call a warehousing arrangement. You bring in the vehicles, you put them in a warehouse, or a bond as we call it, and you only pay duty on them as they're sold. That was explained to me at some point in time, some time ago. I don't know if that arrangement still obtains. And so in order to pressure Solomon, from what I was told, it is alleged that the government of the day, the then PPP, was insisting that he pays duties on every single vehicle that he brought in at one time. And since he couldn't have that, he didn't have access to that capital or couldn't afford to do that, eventually I think they won. Because there's no longer King Solomon Auto Sales. There might be other factors at play. But I'm using that to say to you that in its quest for a new domination, the government also, like we saw with Savons, like we saw with like we saw with Karkir and so on, exerts unnecessary pressure on black-owned businesses to push them out of the market. So the question is, where are our African Guyanese organizations to stand in defense of African-owned businesses when they come under these pressures? That's another solution, right? Black people, African Guyanese need to know that organizations like the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and all the other civil, quote-unquote, civil society organizations that they got in Georgetown, dominated by Indo-Guyanese, Hindu Guyanese, representing businessmen and women of their ilk for the most part. When I say for the most part, because in every one of these organizations you might very well find a token Negro. You might even find a token Negro as the head of that organization to give the impression that it is not ethnic or religiously dominated. But while that token Negro is there as head, the people with the power, the decision makers in the majority, don't look like that ethnic, that token Negro. And so I'm arguing that African Guyanese need similar organizations, similar institutions to stand up in their defense to protect their business interests. Morning, neighbor, morning. Morning, are you morning? Welcome to another program of Guyanese Morning Time. It is now 7 hours 19 on the 5th day of July in the year 2023. It's the morning after the CARICOM conference, etc. It's the morning after you heard of Nigel Darnell's resignation. Interesting, huh? Yeah. Very interesting. But how have you been? How you spend it yesterday? How you pass it last night? How you wake up? What you plan doing today? They call questions, answer them. How was your yesterday? How many of you went out to the protest line yesterday? Made some money? How much money you made? I hope you made a lot of money. Money makes the world go round. Money makes things happen. My friend says, the Jamaicans say, every mickle make a muckle. That's to say, money is not too little bit. If you know how to manage it, if you know what to do with it, eventually you can make it do magic for you. Always remember, 100 cents make $1. How do you start making $1? Who wants to answer that question for me? It's not a riddle. If 100 cents make $1, how do you make $1? Where do you start to make $1 if 100 cents make $1? That's a question I want you to answer. Right? Maybe I'll have some quiz like those. Somebody told me the last time I said something like this. Mr. Amsterdam, the children coming to have a good time. They ain't coming for you, put them through academic work. Maybe I'll have some quiz. As I get to ask my 12-year-olds and younger, if 100 cents make $1, where do you start to make $1? I see Charlie Williams say investment. Charlie, wrong. You see, these simple questions twist us up and turn us up because we think within the box or outside the box. I don't know what y'all thinking. But the question is simple. If 100 cents make $1, where do you start to make $1? Right? We have to understand building foundations, and that's important. We have to understand building foundations. we cannot get a skyscraper without a foundation. Especially if we build a skyscraper on a weak foundation, it will come tumbling down. So it's important to place a lot of emphasis on the foundation. Correct answer, Randy Moore. If 100 cents make a dollar, you gotta start at a cent. And so if you don't know how to treasure that cent, if you don't know how to protect that cent, you ain't get into a dollar. Good? And the maths continues. I got a friend say you gotta make the maths. Good? Anyway, it's Wednesday. We'll talk tomorrow about these things. We'll talk tomorrow about more of these things. It's Wednesday. It's Dr. HINDS' day. And so we have a lot to talk about. I want to believe, like the whole of Guyana, Dr. HINDS feels victorious. Darmlal has resigned. What? Let him speak for himself. Dr. HINDS, welcome to the program. Good morning.
Morning.
How are you doing?
I am doing.
I hope, sometimes when I reflect on how I greet you and ask you how you doing, I hope you don't get offended, just by that, because, it's we country people thing.
Yeah.
Right? Yesterday, a young lady came to my gate. Well, I couldn't talk like this yesterday because I had a mouth problem. It's partly rectified. I had some serious... I had a dental issue, so I got that sorted. It comes with 50. So a young lady came to my gate yesterday after I returned from the dentist. And she said she's part of some pageant and she has to do her introduction in Creolese. And she is not good at Creolese. So somebody advised her to come by Sir Kiraki and he will help her out. Can you imagine? You're a Buxtonian child, you're born in Buxton, you go on the East Coast, you grow up in the village and you don't know Creolese?
I can imagine it.
Why? Oh, why? What would be the cause of that? For me, that's my first language.
Well, partly it's because we try to get our children not to speak it. Second, we don't teach it in schools. Third, if you don't understand English language too well, you'll have difficulty with Creolese because the constructions are the same, Me been there. I was there. The same English construction. Because remember, Creolese is really a fusion of English with remnants of African languages. So in a sense, it's a new language and it has developed its own rules, its own emphasis and so on. And if you don't teach it, people will speak it, but when you ask them in a formal way to talk about it, they'll have difficulty. Here is the case to teach Creole or Creolese in schools. In those countries that teach both the Creole and the English, you find people are fluent in both.
I'm happy for that explanation. I reflect as a teacher. It's a joke I always tell. When I was English language teacher at the CSEC level at one of the private schools on the East Coast, predominantly Indians, the students, all you could get them talk is Awi and Ayo, right? And one day challenge, I must say, listen, you are exam students, and you have to do better than this. Because you have to understand that you have to practice using standard English as we see. Because the time you take to, as I would say, translate in the exam room, it's time going. So you have to get to that point. And I had this brilliant student, I think her name was Bibi. And I'm quarreling with them and so on, and Bibi came to me a day and Bibi says, sir, I understand what you're saying, But anytime we try to use standard English at home, our parents chastise us. Right? Oh, you think you're better than our way? You come with the English. Right? And I'm saying that to say, look at, I would say the the difference identified by you. You're saying that we try not to get our children to speak Creolese. But here it is on the opposite side, the people chastising their children for speaking standard English. And like I said, I believe it should be my first language. You grow up in a community where Creolese, in my mind, is dominant. And so what you should be transitioning is from Creolese to English. Not knowing the thing. Right? But the longer you live, the more you learn this thing. Like, you wanted to say something here? I see your eyes are
No.
Oh.
You're quite right. I mean, you know, we learn the two languages not together. We learn them separately, and that's where the difficulty is. When you have two languages and you learn them separately, you end up, as they say, being neither fish nor fowl. The two languages have to be learned together because they are constructed together. They're constructed together. One comes from the other, and if once you learn them separately, then you're learning them as strangers rather than learning them together.
Very well. And always remember, brother, you see teaching us English language and giving us these Creole challenges. Translate this to standard English and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, when we were growing up, my generation, there were always men and women in the village who would insist that we learn Creolese and learn the construction of Creolese and learn the meaning. Viewers and listeners would have heard me over the years making reference to Teacher George, who taught English, but he was an expert at speaking Creolese. And he would insist that we learn the two languages together, and he insisted that they were languages. He once told me, you know, he said they invited him to go to UG to talk about proverbs and Creole. He said, well, you know, they will invite me at UG to talk about Creole and proverbs. He said, you want school by? I mean, why you know you'll be proud of Teacher George? He said, me go there. And when you see me start for talk, so them I eat out of me hand. This time, me not gone a second gear yet. Me there first gear. If me been go a third gear, me not broke up the whole university. And Teacher George was that kind of chap. And you notice he's teaching you're educated by insisting that you use the language, and you see there how he used the images, you know. Me not gone a second gear yet, me there first gear. And I saw them eat out me and he making the point that here are educated people at the university, and he's speaking to them in Creolese, and they are mesmerized, you know. So in a sense, he's making the point that you are making, but he's also insisting to me, not come like them, not come like them.
Very well. No, it's 50 years. CARICOM is 50 years. I should say as a I don't know, a member of the CARICOM generation, because CARICOM gives me a few days in age. I recognized yesterday. I've seen so much. I've seen. I grew up hearing the championing calls of CARICOM, the virtues of CARICOM. I also witnessed in changing times what I consider the failures of CARICOM. We have a single market and common market treaty and all of that, but we have the CARICOM members fighting each other for what we call local content rights and common external tariff exemptions and stuff like that. We have a Caribbean Court of Justice that more than half of the community is not a part of, and so on and so forth. Is CARICOM still relevant at 50?
Oh, yes, most relevant. most relevant. The Caribbean integration movement has to go back to the plantation. The plantation was a system across the Caribbean. The plantation owners did not see the system as Trinidadian or Barbadian or Guyanese. You know, they saw it as a total system, and I would argue that therein lies the origin of regional integration. And so I am making the argument that regional integration starts with what we have in common, what we share. And in this case, you know, the Black Stallions song, The Caribbean Man, that we come on the same ship from the same place. And so we must push one common intention for we women and the children. And that a man who don't know his history cannot form no integration. And so he's arguing there that identity becomes the basis for integration. And of course, the identity of coming, the identity that comes out of the coming on the ship, whether it was the ship from Africa or the ship from India or the ship from Madeira, we all came on ships. So of course, the indigenous people did not come on ship, but one imagine that some of them came by boat. Some of them may have come by land, but I'm sure some of them came by boat. And so for me, CARICOM at its heart, it's about our identity, what we share. So that when you go to Trinidad or you go to St. Kitts or you go to Nevis or St. Vincent, if you're a Guyanese, you feel at home. You see somebody who looks like somebody you know in your village. We speak the same, different emphasis or what they call different accents, but we speak the same, we walk the same, we think the same. And so therefore, integration comes, if you will, naturally to us. Where our difficulty has been is that we have developed as nation states, each of us, each quote-unquote island, and that we have developed a political identity, a civic identity, called Jamaica or Guyana or St. Vincent. And often it is that civic identity that is fighting against the cultural identity, and vice versa. The cultural identity is fighting against the civic identity, or put it another way, there is a tension between the civic identity and the cultural identity. We lasted as one country between 1958 and 1962. What was called the Federation. Guyana was not part of it, and Guyana was not part of it for political reasons that the PPP government argued at the time, that Indians would become a minority if Guyana were to join the Federation. And so they didn't join the Federation for political reasons. Guyana and Martin Carter, Rory Westmas, etc., would then split from the PPP in a second split of the party on the question of federation, because they felt that it was Guyana's place to be in the Federation. The Federation lasted from 58 to 62, and it ended when Jamaica, which was the northernmost country in the Federation at the time, Bahamas was not part of it. And the Jamaican economy at that time was the quote-unquote strongest in the Caribbean. You know, the Jamaican dollar at that time was stronger than the American dollar as a result of bauxite and tourism. Jamaica's economy, from a numerical standpoint, was doing well. And so Jamaica, or the Jamaica Labour Party, felt that its destiny was with the North, with America. And Jamaica was so far away from the rest of us that they didn't know the rest of the Caribbean as much. And, they called the Federation, and the supporters of the Jamaica Labour Party voted to leave the Federation. And Eric Williams, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, then said 1 from 10 leaves nothing, because there were 10 of them, and the strongest one left, and Eric Williams said 1 from 10 left nothing, and that was the breakup of the Federation. But it was not the end of the dream, because we went into what was called the Little Eight. That is the OECS countries, and today the OECS is the epitome of regional integration. They have their own bank, they have their own currency, they have their own court, and they are functioning as one of the best regional integration movement in the world. From the Little Eight, we then moved into CARIFTA in 1965, the Caribbean Free Trade Area. And there were talks about Guyana, Antigua, St. Kitts, I think, becoming one country, and so forth. But we went through CARIFTA, and then out of CARIFTA came CARICOM in 1973. So while we did not get to a political union, we have a kind of functional cooperation. We continue to have that tension between our islandness and our regionalist perspective. And that is to be understood. We have the institution of cricket. We have been playing cricket together, Test cricket since 1928. Ups and downs, we notice Jason Holt making a plea for what he calls the regionalization of our cricket, saying that insularity has stepped in. We have the University of the West Indies, which is a shining example of regional integration. We have a court, although as you mentioned, not all of the member states belong to the Caribbean Court of Justice, but they're all affected by the Caribbean Court of Justice. That is, although Jamaica, for example, is not a member of the CCJ, a Jamaican could bring a case before the CCJ, as happened in the Myrie case, where Miss Myrie from Jamaica was denied entry into Barbados, and she sued. And it went all the way to the CCJ. And Barbados was arguing that Ms. Myrie did not have standing because Jamaica was not part of the court. And the court ruled otherwise. The treaty itself says that the CCJ, as an original destination, it's an original destination for all the countries. It's not the final court, but it's their original court. And Ms. Myrie won her case. And that case has implications for all the member countries, including Jamaica. So we have made some strides. We do have a single market in the CARICOM is a market where certain goods and certain categories of labor can move freely. We don't yet have a single economy, but we have a single market. So in many regards, we have done well as an integration movement. I mean, the EU, they've been in existence since the 1950s. And we notice Brexit, where England has moved away out of the Union. And they, in the EU, they have what is called the opt-out clause. So take, for example, in Britain, the United Kingdom, always maintained its pound. It was never part of the EU currency. And I think a couple of the Scandinavian countries do not use the EU currency. So regional integration is not an easy thing because you're trying to bring together nation states. They may share a lot culturally, but the pull of the nation state is always there. So I would say that after 50 years, we've survived. One, we've survived as a regional entity. Two, that there is a lot of regionalization at the level of the people. There are many people here this morning watching this program from a lot of the islands in the Caribbean, if not all of them. Guyanese are living in Montserrat and Nevis and Barbuda, and I'm calling the ones that are not the more popular ones. They're living all over. They're living all over. And more now, you are seeing Caribbean people coming into Guyana. This is not new. Guyana used to be the destination for a lot of quote-unquote islanders, as we called them when I was a child. A lot from St. Vincent, a lot from St. Lucia. That Madia, for example, is a St. Lucian place. A lot of St. Lucians came to work in the fields, in the gold fields, and lots of them lived at Madia. You go to a place like Linden, lots of Vincentians, lots of St. Lucians, lots of Grenadians. A lot of the families there come from those quote-unquote islands. And so we have always had people moving between and among the Caribbean. Trinidad, at one time it was difficult to find more than half of the Trinidadian population that was Trinidadian. George Lamin made that point when he, as a Barbadian, went to Trinidad for the first time. It was difficult to find a pure Trinidadian family. There was a Trinidadian mother, a Grenadian father, or a Vincentian father, Trinidadian mother. A lot of movement between Grenada and St. Vincent and Trinidad, St. Vincent and Trinidad. And, you know, as the audience know, I study Calypso. And you'd be amazed at the Calypsonians, all of them. I mean, Sparrow was born in Grenada. You know, Valentino was born in Grenada. The Duke mother is a Vincentian, and we can go on and on and on. And Trinidad is really a Caribbean cosmopolitan place. With the number, lots of Guyanese went there too, in Trinidad. And we know, of course, migration between Barbados and Guyana. Ironically, because Bajans, as you know, at some point politically tried to keep Guyanese out. But lots of traffic between Barbados and Guyana. My own HINDS family originated in Barbados. I have Barbadian great-grandsons, great-great-grands. So as a region, as a people, our integration has gone further than our integration as governments. And my generation, for example, is a CARICOM generation. You know, we are Guyanese, but grew up on Bob Marley's music. You know, we learned to accept a Vivian Richards as a West Indian. And, you know, the scholars that we were enamored with, lots of them were non-Guyanese. And so my generation is a CARICOM generation. In my own intellectual development, my own cultural sense of myself is very, very Caribbean, very West Indian. And you can tell, I mean, people who listen to me speak, that I don't exclude my Caribbeanness from my own consciousness of self. And I think that goes a lot for my generation.
Thank you. in the age of digitization, we notice there's a digital ID, there's digital this, there's digital that. One, there are many who argue that these the creation of these digital stuff is for, let me call it singularity, making it easier for travel and commerce and everything. Do you get the impression that CARICOM is closer to that political union that we perhaps were aiming for in the early?
No, I think, ironically, the political union is farther and further away. I think we're functional, we're doing well as functional, but the political union is problematic because, my God, I mean, we are 57 years as Guyanese, a Guyanese nation state. Jamaica and Trinidad are 61 years. And so we've developed that islandness when it comes to our politics. And the further we move away from the federation, the more difficult political union is going to be. Meanwhile, the present government in Guyana, for example, I think they are using the status quo of CARICOM, but the PPP is anti-integration. As I said, the PPP didn't take Guyana into the federation. The PPP always saw CARICOM as a black people gang, and they were very angry at the Caribbean leaders for not condemning Burnham during Burnham years. They felt it was a club. That, you know, people like Burnham and Barrow and Eugenia Charles, they all were in England together. And Eugenia Charles told me in an interview I did with her years ago, she said, well, you know, I know when Odo became a communist, you know, the communist man used to come every Sunday at the dorms. And he would spend the longest with Odo. And so I know when he became a communist, because she, Barrow, and Burnham were at university in England at the same time. And they knew each other. And, you know, she said, you know, I could tease him. Odo, why are you dressing up like that? How can you represent the masses and wearing your mauve suit, you know? And, you know, she said she would tease him, and she could, because they went to school together, and they had that that bond. And the PPP, so Dragon didn't go to school in England. Dragon went to school in America. And so he was not part of that club, if you will. And so the PPP developed a kind of anti-CARICOM reflexes, which is still there. In the 1990s, when Pandey came to power in Trinidad and the PPP was in power in Guyana, and there was an Indian-led government in Suriname, they attempted to form a sub-regional group. They didn't get very far. So I don't think the PPP will join. They will, under their leadership, they will join a political union of the Caribbean. Because politically, they will argue that Indians would be a minority. You know, you look at the PPP's attitude to Asians coming here. And I don't think it's a dislike for Asian people. But it's a political move. Haiti is the largest, has the largest population in CARICOM. And if we were to become one Caribbean, then almost half of our population as a Caribbean country would be Haitians. And more than 2/3 would be Africans. And so the PPP wouldn't agree with that. So I'm saying that to say that they are political issues. We know in Jamaica, for example, the Jamaica Labour Party to this day continues to be resistant to CARICOM. I mean, the PNP, the People's National Party, is more pro-CARICOM than the Jamaica Labour Party. And so you have these issues of politics inside of the countries that are militating against a one Caribbean political union.
Thank you. You know, Dr. Hines, catch your breath. Get some water. Let me ask Lynette a question. Lynette, are you getting song now? I see Lynette saying she is getting no song. She's the only person who's complained. So if you have a song problem, please let me know quickly before I ask the next question of Dr. Hines. As Winston Jordan would say, it's a good way to segue into one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. I was hoping to leave that for the last, but that you've mentioned it, in that the PPP was never keen, Jagan was never keen on joining CARICOM because he believed that Indians would be a minority in that grouping. But when Pandey became president, he was keen on forming some kind of union with Guyana, Trinidad, and Suriname. I recently came upon a video which I've been discussing on this program with Ravi Dev in 2014 attending a Hindu Congress in Suriname, and basically was promoting the idea of Hindus coming to Guyana and taking over, as I would say, in the various sectors. It was clearly a case of making a case for Hindu domination in Guyana, and the idea of that same quote-unquote tripartite relationship between Guyana, Suriname, and naturally Trinidad, obviously with a different leadership at the time. You must have seen that video. You must have had discussions around it. Help us to understand the PPP position.
It was a conference in India. It was a conference in India.
Oh, it was India, not Suriname.
Yeah, it was delegates there from the Indian diaspora that went to India. And the person who drew my attention to that thing is Eric Phillips. Weeks after Rafi Dev made the thing, Eric discovered the video and shared it with some of us, and I promptly shared it with Brother Guyana. And to this day, he has expressed an interest in that thing. He kept asking me over the years to send that video back to him because he wanted to address it. I think he wrote something on it, if I'm not mistaken, when we first discovered the video, or Eric shared it with us. So it's an old video. Nobody, well, not nobody, many people did not pay attention to it. And because politics is contextual, yeah? The consciousness of that kind of behavior or that kind of emphasis by Ravi Dev, 7 years ago, 9 years ago, there wasn't that consciousness then, and people would look at a video like that and they wouldn't attach so much importance to it. But today, given what the PPP is doing, given the wealth that has now come to Guyana, a video like that assumes great importance and people will spot it very easily. I'm smiling because, the kind of work that people like myself do in trying to build Black consciousness, of course, is derided by many people, derided by the PPP, derided by some Indians, derided by some Africans. People like me are racist, the worst racist. But I'm smiling because as I have been moving around the past couple of months, Guyana, I've been paying attention to see whether there's a rise in Black consciousness among African people. Those are not things you can measure by numbers. I mean, I suppose you can do polls and research and so on. But I've been listening to the language, the political language of our people. And I can discern a shift in the political language of African Guyanese. And it's a language that is grounded more in an African identity, an African sense of self, an awareness of not just our unity as Guyanese, but also an awareness of our manyness, if I may call it that, you know, that we are different ethnic groups function in the same space. We are united, but we are also diverse. And I see that sense of diversity. Africans have always had a problem with, you know, because you see, African identity has always been put over slavery, you know, and clearly nobody wants to remember the slave experience. No, and so people move quickly from that to the civic identity, you know, the Guyanese identity and so on and so forth, at the expense of the cultural identity, because their cultural identity takes them back to slavery in a way that Indians and Portuguese and so on, their cultural identity doesn't take them back to that terrible place because they came after slavery ended. And so African people have always struggled with an identity-grounded sense of self. And it ebbs and flows. At the time of the Black Power movement, there was a rise in that consciousness of our identity. And then once the Black Power movement ran its course and new generations came into being, that sense of identity has subsided. And then we had the rise of the the Black Matters movement, which is the new Black identity movement. And with the rise of the Black Matters movement, we see again another rise in a sense of consciousness among young Black Americans and increasingly West Indians. And our own Guyana, you know, we have struggled with the politics. Our politics, which is grounded in a non-identity kind of politics, and identity politics that has to do with our diversity. But, you know, as I said, I have discerned a rise in a sense of identity among Africans. Many people, some people may argue that that is not true. Of course, it's very difficult to measure it. And if you're starting from a place of 20% consciousness as Africans and you're moving now to 60%, you're not at 100%, but you're 40% further than you were 3 years ago or 4 years ago. And so that identity politics, I think, is now playing a role. And so a tape like the Rafi Def tape is spotted and it's circulating like wildfire among African Guyanese. Now, the Indian government has a department that is called the Diaspora Department or Overseas Department. And they encourage that Indian connection with the mother country. Some call it the Hindufta movement, coming out of the Hindu hegemony. There is an organization called the GOPIO, and they invite people, Indian leaders every year. They have a big conference in New York. Dr. Jagan addressed that conference in 1988. And in his address, he said Indians were second-class citizens in Guyana. Not for the first time, eh? Way back in 1952, 53, Dr. Jagan said the same thing in a book that he wrote. The name of the book is escaping me now, a small book. Guyana loves to quote that. And Guyana drew my attention to that since I was a young boy. And then he repeated it in 1988 at the GOPIO conference, that Indians are second-class citizens in Guyana, and that he was in favor of a Mandela solution, and that is power sharing. Of course, he reneged on that once he got power in 1992. What is also not known is that Jagan had written to the United Nations calling for partition of Guyana. Of course, partition is pinned on Guyana. But Peter de Garrett called for ideological partition. Long before Guyana had called for joint premiership with partition as a last resort. Guyana call was not for partition, it was for joint premiership.
Shared governance, as we call it now.
We call it shared governance now. Jagan had written to the United Nations, pleading that Indians were being treated badly in Guyana and the possibility of partition. You see, so there's always been that separatist trend within Indian Guyanese thought, Indian West Indian thought. There's always been that separate trend back to India. We had our Back to Africa movement, starting in the United States, and then Garvey made it popular. There was also the Back to India movement, and very strong trend in Indian thought. And Rafidev comes out of that thought. And so the separatism now is not back to India. The separatism now is India in Guyana. India in Guyana. And you had Indian thinkers and religious leaders visiting Guyana since the 1940s and 1950s and urging Indians to make Guyana an Indian colony, if you will. And so when you listen to Rafidev at that conference, what you were hearing there is that strong tendency and, encouraging Indians to come to Guyana because there are opportunities in Guyana. They must come and they must invest. The notion that Indians are naturally business people and that Africans are not business people, so that there are opportunities come. You all are natural business people. Come to Guyana and invest. So come to Guyana and accumulate wealth. Of course, if there are Indians here, that will become a political advantage for the PPP and so on. But it's a strong tendency in Indian thought that there should be that strong unity between Indians at home and Indians abroad, and that is what Rafidev was expressing. They're ominous, because the way when you listen to Dev, you get the feeling that Indians control Guyana. Or even if they don't control it, they have intentions of controlling Guyana. And so they're inviting their brothers and sisters to come here and be part of that. And he was making that point when we did not start pumping oil. So you can imagine now how that tendency is very strong. So I'm saying it is both a critique of the Indian intellectual mindset. But even as I say that, I say we also have had our Back to Africa, Pan-Africanist movement. There was a time when Africans came to Guyana, African Americans came to Guyana, not in large numbers. When I was at high school, I had about 2 or 3 African Americans, Pan-Africanists, who had moved to Guyana, teaching me in school. A couple of them lived in Buxton, you know. Brother UC had visited Africa shortly after the PPP came to power, visited 13 countries, I think, African countries. Burnham was not well known in Africa at that time. And he tried to get Brother UC to become ambassador of the United Nations. And Brother UC tell him he's not a diplomat. But what he could do for him, he could go as an emissary to Africa and to introduce the Africans to the PNC government, which he did. And so when he went to Africa, he developed contacts, not just with Africans, but with African Americans who had migrated to Africa. A lot of them were in Ghana at that time. Kwame Nkrumah had come to power in 1957. And the pull of Africa had pulled lots of African Americans to Ghana. And some of them also went to Nigeria and other parts of West Africa. Maya Angelou lived in Africa at that time. And Brother Yussi had established contacts with the Africans and the African Americans and some West Indians who were there. And later on, after Nkrumah was overthrown in 1964, some of the African Americans went to Tanzania, where Nyerere had started the Ujamaa movement, African socialism. And some of them came to Guyana. Some went to Tanzania and some came to Guyana. You had people like Tom Feelings, and he was a famous African-American artist, and some others whose names are escaping me now. Julian Mayfield, who came and was an advisor to Burnham. Julian Mayfield eventually married our sister Joan Cambridge. That's her husband. And there were lots of African Americans who lived in Guyana as Guyanese. Some of them stayed and they've never gone back. I'm saying, given that history, to say we have had our migrations from the African diaspora too. But that has waned in recent times. Yes, African Americans, for the most part, went to South Africa. When Mandela came, another group of African Americans migrated to South Africa. And so Guyana is no longer the destination for Pan-Africanists, as they used to be. The African Liberation Day, African Liberation Movement, the headquarters, the secretariat was in Guyana. Now, they still celebrate African Liberation Day in the United States of America and other parts of the diaspora, but that secretariat was in Guyana. And a lot of that thing broke up when Guyana and Burnham fell out in 1971. The PNC moved against a lot of the African Americans who were here, those who supported Guyana, because there was a split. Some of them supported Burnham, some of them supported Guyana. The ones who supported Guyana, a lot of them were, I don't want to use the word deported, but they were pushed out of the country. So that kind of Pan-African pull to Guyana suffered when the two major African leaders fell out in 1971. But as usual, I give that long history to your question about Ravi Dev's call to Indians to come to Guyana to invest.
You know, one of the things which struck me in Ravi Dev's presentation and reminded me starkly that you always say that it's not racist to fight for your own or to represent your own, but it is racist when you put yourself for your own as superior to others. In that particular video, I what Ravi said, that the Hindu is superior.
Yeah. I have not listened to it for a very long time, but I think you might be correct in the. Well, Hinduism itself is hierarchical. The caste system is very, very, very close to the race system. Race is about hierarchies of people. As I always say, race is skin color with meaning. You give meaning to skin color. And so there's a hierarchy of skin color with white at the top and black at the bottom. And then you have the various sort of colors in between, the brown people, the red people, the yellow people, etc. And when you go to the caste system, the same thing. You have the Brahmins at the top. And then you have the Dalits at the bottom. The Brahmins are the fair-skinned Indians, and the Dalits are the dark people. Dalits are actually black people. So the very caste system itself is about superiority. A lot of African-American scholars use what they call the color caste system because they see caste and race, which is about color, having the same kind of trajectory. And so it is not accidental when some of our Indian thinkers slip in to that notion of superiority. I'm being very careful because, like I said, I'm taking your word for it. I haven't listened to Ravi's speech for a little while. And so, but I did remember there was something there about superior and so on and so forth. See, I don't want to accuse the brother of advocating racial superiority.
You don't want to trust me either. That's my interpretation. You don't want to trust me.
But I'm saying I'm trusting you.
Except I don't want to go and spend time looking for the video and the insert and so on.
No. I recall there was reference there to superiority. I recall that distinctly.
So are we seeing this this claim of superiority, this quest to Hindu domination? Is that what we're confronted with in Guyana in an oil economy?
Well, that may very well be part of it. That may very well be part of it. I don't think that is all of it. But people are all of who they are. And you see, over time, Hinduism has given way to Indianism. Let me explain to what I mean by that. Our in Indian brothers, they came, some were Hindus, some were Muslims. And when they got here, some of them became Christians. And so they do not function in the diaspora as in the political realm. They do not function as Hindus, they function as Indians. In that the Indian Christian, the Indian Muslim, and the Indian Hindu vote the same way. They see politics the same way. In Trinidad, they used to say that the Muslims were different. In fact, there was a claim that a lot of the Muslims voted for the PNM. I don't know if that is still true. But I know in Guyana, the integration of the various religions came very quickly. No, that does not mean they're not intra-Indian conflicts. I was always mesmerized as a boy to hear Hindus talk about Fulaman, meaning the Muslims. Nasty. But at the level of politics, they've become Indianized. And I think it's Brother Yusi who observed that the Indian Christian and the Indian Muslims, they are very influenced by Hinduism. So they're not Hindus, but they live in the community where Hindus are the majority. And in many regards, they become Hinduized. So it's a very complex formation, and I don't doubt that there are influences within the Indian community that are pushing the notion of superiority. You're hearing whispers that with the rise of Ali to the presidency, Muslims, Guyanese Muslims, are beginning to flex their muscles. You're hearing that a lot of the Indian capital in Guyana is grounded in the Muslim community, and that there are growing rifts between Muslims and Hindus. I hear that all the time.
There are also whispers, Dr. Hines, sorry, that despite the fact that Ali as a Muslim is head of the government is dominated by the Hindus.
Well, yes, as I said, you know, the community itself is grounded in Hinduism, even though people may be Christians or maybe, and you preempted me because I was smiling. Because when people talk about this rift between Hindus and Muslims, I don't pay too much. I'm sure there are Muslims who are trying to use the presence of a Muslim at the helm of the government in order to push for more power by Muslims in the government. I'm sure there is that. But I don't think that it's a big deal. It's a big deal. I think the all-Indian notion of politics remains very grounded, certainly at the level of leadership in the Indian community.
Thank you for that. You know, I myself smile at times when these thoughts come to my head. Because while it's not your belief, I want to say that it's in my mind it's kind of visible in the society that there are rifts. There is this division. There is this quest for Hindu domination versus Muslim domination in the PPP. You look at the likes of Anil Nandlal and Jack Dio and Priya and so on, and one would argue that you easily see them dominate Irfan Ali. There's a rumor. Let me say there's a rumor that when this rape matter broke with Dharamlal, the allegations of rape against Dharamlal, Ali said, let the law take its course. He wanted to remove Dharamlal from office. And Jack Dio said, no, it can't happen. It would never happen.
You know, the reason I chuckle at those things is that I am not doubting them. I'm not in the PPP, so I don't know. And I'm not, but they don't amount to much. The thing is that when we begin to entertain those thoughts in our minds, then we begin to entertain thoughts about rifts. And then when the leaders of the PPP band together, we become disappointed because the rifts are not manifested. No, I'm sure. And like I said, I'm sure there are Muslims in and around the people who are making their moves to get a share of the wealth. But that does not mean that there is a rift. There may be competition, not rift. You know, we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful with these things because we can become disappointed when they're not manifest. You know, I'm sure there is competition.
Okay,
you know, yeah. Go ahead.
It's 20 minutes past 8 o'clock. Oh, I see somebody is complaining that Evan Prasad is taking away the attention from the discussion. I am going to repeat it. We have adults on this program. I said it earlier in the week. We have adults on this program. And if the adults on this program can't recognize Evan Prasad for what he is, I'm sad to say, I'm sorry, I can't help you out. I cannot help you. It's not 2 days we're doing this. It's not 3 days, it's years. And so we know why certain people come. We know why Evan Prasad and the others come. Right? But while they come to distracting their distractions, they also provide information that we can use. It is for us to be able to discern. It is for us to be able to separate what is valuable from what is not valuable. Good? So please, don't ask me to block Evan Prasad. Don't ask me to block anybody. You block them out of your minds. That's what you have to do.
I think our people have to leave those people alone. You know, I read a letter in today's newspaper by someone who says he's a retired professor. He was taking offense to a letter written by Brother Lincoln Lewis. And he was saying, how can Lewis be talking with saying that PPP is dominating? If Lewis doesn't see the daily attacks on the government from Norton and HINDS and other APNUites. And I make that thing to say that these people monitor our programs every day. And I am not sorry they're doing it. I want them to monitor what we are saying and what we are doing. I want them to, because we are not doing anything clandestine. We are in the open space. And we are doing our political work. And they are aware of the impact of our political work. They are aware of it. And so I leave those people alone. I don't bother with them too. I don't bother to block anybody. Let them, when they make their remarks, just ignore them. Just ignore them and pay attention to our discussion. Because they are paying attention to our discussion. The leaders, whether they're intellectual leaders, academic leaders, political leaders, their leaders listen to our programs. I am referenced constantly in Guyana Times without calling my name. Constantly. Partly because they pay attention to what we say, but partly because they know that what we are saying has resonance with our people. And so sometimes we have to ignore them. We have to ignore them. Because that's what they want you to do, to distract you from the main message.
I'm surprised, man. Some of us are easily distracted. Let's talk. It's 8 hours 24. I would have liked to open up the lines now, but we got more things to talk. And so, Bear Strain, you get your saviors. I read last night, Dr. Hines, that Ali apparently addressed the nation, or addressed the issue of the Dharamlal rape allegations from the CARICOM conference, wherever they are right now. And among the things he said is that Dharamlal has offered his resignation. And so he's going to be resigning from the government, cabinet, and parliament. But he has indicated his continued support for the PPP. Of course, you know that resignation came after the DPP issued advice to the police yesterday to say that they should not proceed with charges against Dharamlal because the young lady is on record as saying that she doesn't wish to continue what I would call loosely the prosecution of Dharamlal, because as observers like myself say, she's tired of the constant grilling, the constant harassment, the isolation and harsh treatment and so on from government quarters. Your take on this whole fiasco, as I would want to call it, with the allegations, the bungling of the investigations, the returning of the files to the police, the eventual request of the child according to them, and now this advice from the DPP and the so-called resignation of Dharamlal.
Well, you know, the I think it was on this program or if not on this program, my program, I said that we have to be very careful about the call for the resignation of Dharamlal, not because the call is wrong. But lots of time when these things happen, we call for the resignation of people. And some of us were very fearful that they were going to give us what they gave us, which is get him off the criminal charge. and as an appeasement, ask him to resign. And that is what happened. There is a strong feeling among some of us that is what will happen. And that is why it is always important to tie the two things together: resignation and justice. Because resignation from government is not justice. It's not justice.
There's another office for him somewhere, clandestine itself.
Well, even if there's not another office for him, it's still not justice. Even if he doesn't see another public office, it's not justice. Justice has to be seen within the context of equality before the law. An ordinary man or woman with those charges would have had to face the law. And so there's not equality before the law. And in the absence of equality before the law, it's an injustice. It's not justice. And then the complainant who suffered, allegedly, because it's still alleged, but although it's alleged, it's a tacit admittance by the government and perhaps by the accused that something happened and that he would get out of the way of government. There's no justice for the accused, because the accused does not get her day in court to face the person that she alleged abused her. And so there's not justice at the level of the individual and the level of the family. And there's not justice at the level of the citizenry. That is very clear that we don't have equality before the law. Even if one presumes that the accused is innocent until found guilty, there is enough evidence for the accused to have been brought before the court to defend himself in the court, like everybody else would. Oh, it's so easy to charge TACUMA OGUNSEYE for saying that Africans are the majority in the police force and they ought to turn their guns away from Africans. You could find a charge for that. And something as blatant as a rape accusation in a world in which the accuser, anywhere in the world, the accuser is usually assumed to be credible when it comes to these rape cases, but you couldn't find a rape charge in the face of a statement that all of us have seen. And so there's no equality before the law there. And that has to be of great concern to us, because what we are seeing is unequal citizenship. Because citizenship assumes that we are all endowed with the keys of citizenship. And those keys of citizenship include the right to vote and having our votes counted equally, equality before the law, the right to life, the right to housing, the right to land. Those are all important aspects of citizenship. And if you look at the way the government has behaved in terms of equality before the law, in terms of access to land, in terms of access to employment, in terms of access to oil wealth, all those things are part of citizenship. And if you look at the way in which this government has systematically behaved in a discriminatory manner, then one may conclude that there is not equal citizenship. Mr. Dharmlal, like I said, should have been treated like everybody else. The standard is set. There's a strong accusation. There's a strong statement. There's circumstantial evidence. At least let him face the courts like the rest of us. So there is class discrimination because he belongs to the ruling class. And then there is ethnic domination because even among the so-called elites, political elites, African Guyanese political elites are treated differently. Look how many of them have been dragged before the court. Charged. Flimsy things, no evidence. Cases languishing in court for 3 years, 4 years. So what has been demonstrated here is that we're not equal citizens and we don't have equal protection of the law. We don't have equality before the law. The law is used now to protect some people and to discriminate against others. And for me, that is the big story here. Am I glad that he is no longer in cabinet? Of course. But I don't see that as justice. I see that as a three-card trick. You take him out of government in exchange for letting him go and not allowing him to face the music like the rest of us. So it rings hollow. It rings hollow. This whole business of him resigning from government and so forth. I welcome it, but for me, it's not a victory.
There's no statute of limitation on rape. Is there a possibility that these charges can proceed at any time?
The lawyers will say so, but I don't deal much with the law. I'm not an expert on the law. There's a statute of limitation politically. The PPP is not going to suffer as a result of this, politically among its supporters.
Okay, it's now 26 minutes to the 9 o'clock hour. I am going to open up the lines so callers can have their say. The lines are now open. 6225923 is the number to call. What kinds, while we wait, anything you want to introduce?
Well, the Secretary of State is coming tomorrow. The Secretary of State of the United
States. Important. Go ahead. Yes.
And it's the second time a Secretary of State is visiting Guyana in less than 3 years. Secretary of State of the United States of America is visiting a CARICOM country. People on this program and other programs I'm on know that I have repeatedly pointed out that the U.S. Secretary of State visited Jamaica back in 1976-77 to try to get the Jamaican government to go in a pro-American direction. Manly resisted, and the rest is history. There was regime change at the 1980 elections. The Secretary of State is very powerful. It's the fourth in line, you know, the President, the Vice President, the Speaker, and then the Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State is usually the architect of U.S. foreign policy, certainly the face of U.S. foreign policy. And foreign policy is a big deal for the U.S. The military-industrial complex is the merging of military power with economic power, and the role of U.S. foreign policy is to facilitate the military-industrial complex. And so when you see a U.S. Secretary of State visiting Guyana twice in 3 years, it points to the centrality of Guyana in the larger foreign policy, the larger economic policy of the United States of America. And wherever there is US economics and there's US military. The two go hand in hand. The military goes to either prepare or defend American economic and political interests. And so it's a reflection of how much Guyana is at the center of geopolitics. And I want our viewers, if nothing, I want you to remember is that there must be a consciousness of what we are part of. As old people said, it's an easy, It ain't easy. I see we continue to fight our fight and inside of parties, which leader is the better leader. And we continue to fight our fight between political parties, And that fight is important. We have to fight at all levels. We have to fight at the intra-party level, inter-party level. But this thing is big. Everything in Guyana, from elections right down to our economics, are subject to the gaze of geopolitics. Never, ever forget that. I keep saying that the 2020 elections, we may never know who won that election, partly because the elections were not designed to produce a winner or a loser. It was designed to produce a new political order. And what has been introduced is a new political order. The PPP is doing all these unusual things, because of the large geopolitics and the relationship between geopolitics and domestic politics. I'm not saying that there's not a domestic dimension to our politics. That doesn't go away. But I'm saying to see our politics and economics only in its domestic dimension and ignoring the geopolitical dimension is dangerous. Dr. Jeffrey last night on my program made a very important point. If you want regime change, who do you go to? The opposition. And that's what the foreign powers did. In 2020, they went to the opposition first. And so the opposition is always more conscious of regime change than the government. And the opposition is always able to strike a better bargain than the government in power. Then it came with the intervention of Pompeo. And then after that, Pompeo visited after the quote-unquote winner was declared. I wouldn't make that. That may be something that he wants to signal to the Americans, because of course the Americans have said that. They have said that the opposition and the government should work together, and we should work. And so that was perhaps a signal to the Americans rather than an instruction coming from the Americans. As Jeffrey pointed out last night, remember the Americans are big on this whole question of inclusivity. And some people like the parliamentary head of the Democratic Party, they've all raised the question of racial discrimination in Guyana. And so the government is always under pressure to prove that there is not racial discrimination. And that is why some of us are a thorn in their side, because we continue to say there's racial discrimination, and they want that to go away. They want that to go away. And so one of the ways they tried to wish it away was at the recent elections, the local government elections. PPP don't pay attention to local government elections. Political parties generally don't pay attention to it. The citizens don't pay attention to it. But when you see one political party made a big deal about it and made the election about one ethnic group and put so much resources into getting the votes of one ethnic group, you have to ask the question, to what end? And we know the end is not to make African Guyanese equal. It's not to give reparations to African Guyanese. We know it's none of those things. It is really to show the rest of the world, including the Americans, that look, African Guyanese think we are the only thing in town. We have captured them. There's no need to work with their political party. They have abandoned their political party. That is what the local government election was all about. Some of us misread it initially, and we didn't sufficiently realize what the elections were being used to do. And I think it was being used to show that despite what they're saying, African Guyanese do not believe them. African man, they're making a case for a one-party government. And of course that blew up in their faces. You can win 71% of the vote, but if you lose the centers, Georgetown and Linden and New Amsterdam and so forth, then your experiment has failed. So I don't think Blinken is coming to change U.S. foreign policy. He's coming as a courtesy, I think, a recognition that Guyana is now a big player and that Guyana is on the radar of the United States. You know, these visits are symbolic in that regard. It's to emphasize a point. It is not to change foreign policy.
Thank you. So we'll go to the calls now. Call it live.
Yeah, good morning, Guyanese. Good morning, Professor HINDS. I'm going to disagree with the professor. I don't think the U.S. Secretary of State is just coming for a courtesy visit. What is important now to the U.S. government? Guyana from the BRIC countries. All right? It's known worldwide. That's the main reason for his visit. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. That's the bloc. America is pushing against that. I think Mr. HINDS know about that also. So he could comment on that if he wants. But I think that's the main purpose. And this is the time Guyanese got to come out on the street. He must know that he's not happy. This is the time to come out. That's it. They don't. I don't know. That's it. Bye-bye.
Well, you know, the caller is disagreeing with me when he doesn't disagree with me. I said the actual visit is symbolic. But the symbolism is pregnant with a lot of meaning. And the caller agrees with me. You know, sometimes we miss the thing. Right? You know, what I meant is that nothing is going to change tomorrow. the Secretary of State comes on Thursday, and nothing's going to change on Friday or Saturday. In that sense, it's symbolic. But the fact that a Secretary of State is visiting your country is significant. So the call and I are not disagreeing. Right? Sometimes we're too quick to disagree. We are saying the same thing. And insofar as BRICS, I noticed you were giving quizzes before when I came on earlier. And my quiz to the caller, which political party in Guyana has advocated for Guyana to join BRICS?
Caller Live, good morning.
Good morning, Brother Kadaki, and good morning, Dr. Hines. There is so much great food for thought this morning in terms of what is on the a la carte. It's very difficult to choose a particular topic. But I have two quick questions. Recently, and I'm going to base this question off of Dr. Hines a few points ago, where he spoke about the PPP is very averse to the notion of being called a racist, and certainly platforms like yourself and programs like yourself fully illuminates the issues, especially around race and ethnicity in Guyana. My question to you is, recently Jack Dale called, after the GECOM's elections, he was calling for the APNU party to come to the table for at least reaching out and providing an olive branch. And given the timing of this call, and I don't just particularly believe that it was just because of the recent local elections, it is my personal belief is that perhaps knowing that Blinken's coming was imminent, do you believe that Jack Dale's timing on the call for unity or at least alignment and partnership, it is fully analogous to Blinken's coming to Guyana? So that is my first point. Quickly, my second question is, now that Dharamlal has been I will say intermittently, because I don't believe that the case is over, because he's resigned his position both in Parliament and as a minister. Would you confirm that people should still, in the quest for justice, because I believe it was both the pressures internationally as well as the exposure of what folks have done in terms of their advocacy, really prompted the kind of results that the government was fully pressured in doing that? And I think this is a little bit of a rhetorical question. Would you continue to confirm that the Guyanese community, both in the diaspora as well as in Guyana, must continue to demand for justice, so that although there was a first half of some semblance of resolution, but there must be justice in the sense of the Guyanese community and its citizens pressuring and demanding of the DPP as well as the government accountability, so that Dharamlal and as well as this young lady can have their day in court. Thank you. Have a blessed one.
Thank you for your call. Dr. Hines?
Yes. Thank you, sister. And you've been on my mind recently, Kidaki. You know, we had a conversation and I reference the sister. In relation to the first question, yes, they knew that the Secretary of State was visiting. We didn't know that. They knew. And now, in looking back, there is the call for unity with the opposition. There was the rush to hold the local government election at all costs. There is Jack Dio going to Plaisance and overturning the decision of his own government. There is this resignation of this minister When you put all of that together, it's a show. They're putting on a show. It's a show. And it's intended for this visit. It's intended for this visit. So yes, those things result from constant agitation by our people. So I'm not taking away credit from us, because we have to take credit, because our agitation is what push the things the way they are. But it was directed at this visit by the Secretary of State. It is. The second question, yes, I think Damlal is not facing the law as he should, but I think that the outcome, at least the outcome for now, gives us another front on which to advance the struggle. We now are able to talk about equality before the law. It's another element in our struggle, another part of our evidence. So he may not be facing the court, and so there's not justice at the level of the individual, at the level of citizenship. There's not justice. But the fact that that happened allows us to illuminate our case. It makes our case much clearer. See, you can get away, you can win a battle. You can win a battle, and the PPP will no doubt say to themselves, we get halfway by. We get halfway. You'll win a small battle, but in the end, it's the war that you're going to lose. And I use war there, of course, in its larger meaning. Because we are at war in Guyana, the war between good governance and bad governance, the war between discrimination and non-discrimination, the war between justice and injustice, and so forth. And although they would feel they've gotten off here, they've strengthened the case of the opposition. They've strengthened the case for justice. And in that sense, we have to continue the protests and the struggle. And in the process of doing so, that young lady may get justice before the courts. Because when you push the struggle, you sometimes don't know how things are going to end up.
Thank you. Without a cover of political office, it's quite possible. It's now 5 minutes to the 9 o'clock hour. I'm not sure we can take any calls. I apologize for that. I don't intend to go too much past the 9 o'clock hour today. But let me remind you that there's a vacancy in the West Rhinebelt market East Rhinebelt market. Sorry, there's a vacancy for an experienced butcher who will work from 7 to 4 daily with 1 day off, and you can call 609-2049 for more information. Vacancy for one experienced butcher. East Rhinebelt market, working hours are from 7 to 4 daily, and you get 1 day off in the week. Call 609-2049 for further information. Dr. Hines, we got 4 minutes. Anything you want to say in closing?
Well, I did throw a question out that which political party in Guyana has called for Guyana to join the BRICS group of countries and not necessarily join OPEC.
Is it?
And the answer is The answer is the WPA.
Oh, the answer is the WPA. I was about to ask you if it is that that question there was related to the visit of the Secretary of State, because I also saw an article saying that Jagbir is resisting joining OPEN. Was he taking a lesson from Dr. Clive Thomas?
He will have to answer that. He will have to answer that. But just to say to the caller that, you know, he's onto something, that there is an issue there about, because Guyana's become so big on the global stage. It now can decide it's going to join BRICS as opposed to joining OPEC and so on. And then these decisions are going to raise eyebrows among the Americans. But as WPA and Clive Thomas have argued, that we are better served in a multipolar world. And the BRICS group of countries suggests more multipolarity than if we were to go to some other grouping. Argentina, I think, is preparing to join BRICS and so forth. Our position in WPA is not being anti-American, because it would be foolish to take an anti-American position. But what we are arguing is that a country like Guyana is better served to use its leverage for a multipolar world than to get caught in the bipolar war. You know, of America versus China or America versus Russia. And that we feel that the BRICS group of countries, Brazil, South Africa, India, etc., our interests would be better served in that grouping than putting our eggs in one basket.
Thank you very much. It's that 9 o'clock hour. We have on Politics 101 tonight, this evening.
We have not made a decision yet. We have invited several people up to come in on this program. They have not all responded, but we are going to be covering the recent developments tonight. The resignation of the minister. We're going to be covering that tonight. So we continue to cover the issue of the fallout for the Darumlal case.
Thank you very much. Viewers, thank you for joining the program. Remember, it's just a matter of days away. Your children, 12 and under, are invited to celebrate my birthday with me. That's next Wednesday, the 12th. Bring them out and let's have a good time from 1 o'clock. Let me inform you also that Albert Morgan has been charged by the police. Yes, Albert Morgan has been charged by the police for some cybercrime. And he goes to court on the 12th also. Right? So we'll keep our eyes on that. And of course, join me tomorrow morning. We'll have another program of Guyanese Morning Time hosted by the Buxtonian. And I'm promising I will ensure that you get your opportunity to call. And let's share your thoughts. I'm sure you can appreciate the difficulty in taking your calls this morning because there was so much to talk about. Right? Goodbye.